please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Doherty.
Here.
Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
Commissioner Strack.
Here.
Commissioner Thacker.
Here.
Commissioner Walsh.
Here.
It'll be one of those nights, huh?
And hopefully, Commissioner Sabone will come.
I would open the floor for public input, but there's no one in the
We had
gallery.
enough public input last week.
Let the fun begin.
I remember you saying that, and I didn't think nothing of it.
At this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Martin so we can have our conversation on the continuation of the future land use maps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We discussed a couple meetings ago creation of a couple maps. Chairman Strack brought up a concept called the McHenry Loop. And we thought it was a really unique concept, creating kind of a pathway around the city emanating from the downtowns, incorporating Main Street. Main Street, you know, kind of gets left out of a lot of things. And really, we're creating a future land use map. We have one now. And the first map you have kind of is the overall map, which has 5 phases of this loop, and not the one that's blown up, but the one that's smaller in scale.
Okay.
And really, both of these are up for discussion, of course. We'll be focusing on phase 1 in particular. But we can discuss the multi-phase map as well in general, but we want to focus on the future land use of the phase 1 issue. But as far as the multi-phase map, we talked about the loop and how it would extend out from the downtown, and you know, I kind of took some liberties when I met with Chad, and this kind of follows the path system of the city and or the roadways, and or the future bike paths, and or the creek pathway system. So there's not a, you know, as Sean would say, there's not a whole lot of infrastructure that is required to create kind of a system or a pathway where people could use a loop system. You know, you add some signage, you know, and then you're creating land uses around this. So that's all shown on the map. You can see the Riverwalk is also highlighted in a light blue. Future paths are on there. And then we've been trying to round up funding for our Zaxter bike share program, and those stations are also shown on the map as well. Now, if you go to the second map, which is the one that's a larger scale, which is the blown up one of phase 1, and this is really the kind of the downtown loop, if you want to call it that. And this is really the kind of phase 1, which starts at the Main Street and goes down Green, and then kind of goes around up McCollum Lake Road, Peterson Park, you know, and it kind of uses the roadway again and the existing bike path system. So what we want to, one of the goals I put in the staff report, I'm kind of not even following the staff report, but the goals for the meeting are to kind of look at the future land use specifically for this map in particular. Now, if you look inside this area, most of these land uses are already kind of spoken for. There's a lot of residential, but these bullet points in the staff report, there's land uses here that, you know, could be something else. For instance, the area behind Coles. Right now, that's zone C5, it's highway commercial, it's planned commercial. Is it going to be commercial? Probably not. What should it be? Should it be commercial or should it be residential? So I guess
And Doug, let's
Sure.
talk about that a little bit. Commissioners, if you look at this map that Doug's provided, on the right-hand side, there is there's this small space over here that's white that is owned by the city, almost looks like it's right near the river here. And just below that is a section just on the outside to the right of the green line. That's the 53 extension. And if you look at kind of the way it's laid out on the map, you can see that it runs through this top half. Did you see that, Commissioner Walsh?
Yeah.
It kind of runs through the top half of this. So one of the things to think about in Doug's comment about, okay, so what do we do with that area behind Kohl's? You know, currently it's zoned C5 commercial, right? But honestly, you know, once the 53 extension, if it ever comes to fruition, that would kind of change the look and feel of that whole area. So one of the things I think that might be beneficial to everybody at the meeting here is to just kind of mark a line through that section on your map and write 53 on it, because we know that that's going to run right through that area. So Doug and I just had a short conversation about this, and where you look at the second green line, the one right down the middle of the page, the property that's just to the right of that, there are, on the very north edge of the map, we have Olive Garden, the AT&T building, Buffalo Wild Wings, and then a vacant lot. And you can see those, they're just to the right of that middle green line. And then just below that is the 53 extension, and then just to the right of that is a weird triangle-shaped piece. Now it's wet. Like, so what do we do with that? There's some environmental constraint there with the fact that it's wet. Could it be residential? Now it's gonna be right next to the 53 extension. You know, there's a lot of things that could change the look and feel of that if in fact the 53 extension were to be completed. So I think we talked about this, Commissioner Doherty, a couple of meetings ago when we started this project. Like, what are we really looking for? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? I think we're looking for all of that. I think we're looking to say, all right, let's start to mark this up and say, what would it look like 5 years from now? And if 53 got here, what would that change us to look like as well? You know, I don't know where they are with the 53 extension. You hear so much conflicting information about where we are in that project that
we're still fighting over there in Long Grove
right,
about it.
Right, they don't want it to come through Hawthorne Woods. There's all kinds of issue with it. So, I mean, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that it's here and that would be earmarked for that at that time, but then what do we do with the remainder of that for now? And I didn't mean to jump in on you, Doug, but I think those are the important pieces that we should point out, is that piece alone on that very north edge could really change the way things look in the future.
No, that's fine. Those are great points, and I'm just going to make a couple more. I really got in the weeds, and Sean really kind of got out of the weeds, and that's really what we really want to do. I don't want to get in the weeds. I just want to point out this sheet here. Okay, remember we kind of talked about this at the beginning? When we talk about future land uses, the McHenry Loop, we're talking about in the future, we're talking about what are our land uses, what are about our travel trends, we're talking about probably less cars, we're talking about more walking, we're talking about healthy communities, we're talking about a younger population group. A lot of these land uses, when you look at them, you can combine properties. You don't know what to do. We talked about, Sean and I met, we talked about mixed uses. You know, the farm, is this the Knox Farm, Sean, you said? Yeah. The Knox Farm, what could that be? That could be commercial, but maybe mixed use. We don't know, if we don't want to nail a property to a residential, commercial, what is it? We could make mixed use. We could define that more in the text of the comprehensive plan of what a mixed use is as we define it on the future land use map. At the corner of McClellan Lake Road and Riverside. We talked about if the loop goes there, we're gonna have commercial. We don't want a big box commercial, we have neighborhood commercial, but we want to define that. And the other points I want to make are with this came out in discussions at the council. The historic areas that are right on the edge, historic Waukegan, Main Street, there's Riverside Drive, Water Street, and Centerville and Green Street. We talked about calling those out in the comprehensive plan, future land use map, but also in the text, as just creating maybe guidelines and keeping that character of the look of those, of the area, you know, of the homes. You know, is it zoned RA1? Are there 2 units, 3 units? Maybe, maybe not, but we want to keep what the look is. Is that the look? Because those areas really define the community. So we talked about those areas as big picture items. So I'm going to stop there and kind of, you know, Sean can kind of blend in for discussion because he and I kind of met. I don't want to hog the discussion, but those are the things I just kind of want you to think about as you. So we're kind of just looking at big picture items. We don't want to say, I want this parcel that's kind of square here to be this. We kind of just want to hit the big points here. And then I think the goal would be that we once we get going, we look at these areas kind of, you know, each phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, you know, we get in a pattern and this would become a little bit easier as we get in a routine.
And I think ultimately, for the group tonight, is really to look at this scaled down version of the downtown and identify areas that either are not in the city or particularly maybe aren't. For example, we've got some industrial zoning, we've got some of the big box areas that are currently C5 or that type of zoning ordinance in place now, and we're not really, as we look at the growth of the community, are those really still the factors we want to get to? I think the importance of the future land map comes to future meetings for us. So we have a map to say, well, yes, this is the direction that the city's been headed, and we can make a determination for future planning and zoning requests and petitioners that are coming in to say we have an active future plan, and this is what that looks like. And it doesn't mean we won't change that plan if needed, but ultimately it's really just defining where we're at. I think Doug's point about this historic stuff downtown is really probably more pressing tonight, because those are things that are inside of this first box we're looking at. Those are areas that we need to make some decisions on, and then that can kind of push us in that next direction as well. One of the things, the area that's shaded that's not in the city, just above the number 5 on this map, if you're not aware where that is, that would be the area behind St. Pat's. Mm-hmm. And so that whole neighborhood isn't in the city.
Right.
I mean, that's a large portion of residences behind there that are not here. Now, we're not here to change that. That's not what we're looking to do, but identifying some of those pocket areas as we head north of that, we start to look at that area where the old Aldi is, or excuse me, the current Aldi and Kohl's building, you know, the area that's behind that. It touches residential, but it's currently zoned C5. So if you're not aware where that is, if you look between those 2 green lines, that would be this large shaped piece kind of just below the 53 extension. Mm-hmm. These 2 parcels are currently zoned C5, but yet they abut residential. So the question becomes, you know, is that a change that we should look to have some direction on instead of being C5? Maybe that should be residential. Again, it's not being marketed today from the current landowner, but I think as a future land use map, you know, in my opinion, if you already have the Kohl's and the Aldi building there, there's no visibility for a commercial space behind it. No one's going to see it from a thoroughfare. So it would make more sense to look at that as a residential area because it already abuts residential, and we have 2 streets that tee into it, 3 streets that tee into it. It would make, in my opinion, it would make more sense to have that as a residential zoned area because of the fact that if I was a commercial entity looking for space, I sure wouldn't be behind that large Kohl's building. I have no visibility. Right, I mean, what draw do I have to do that? And I think that's kind of the line of thinking that we just need to look at is what makes more sense. it was zone C5 because that could have been a huge commercial entity. If you drove through that area and went behind there, kind of just to the north where the Dick's location is, the problem is we're having the same issue there. The visibility from 31 isn't there, so what's happening? They're not staying full. So we don't want to recreate that problem. I'd rather see residential go to an area like that. So I just think those are some of the things we should probably touch on. And then at that point, we're looking at just this major downtown area on this map. And then as we expand from there, just looking at the little pockets in each one of these areas. And it's gonna take us a while to get this down, but I think if we just start to really look at that phase and say, all right, let's take one piece at a time, what needs to change? Let's get a new map in between these meetings, have it updated, and then we'll get back to it. I think that the areas for me of concern are those two parcels we just talked about, the 53 extension, and those downtown historic districts, and figuring out what it is we want those to look like.
So speaking of the 53 extension, is there any way the city could vacate that property?
Well, the city doesn't own it, the state owns it.
They actually own it.
A lot of this, yes, the state owns this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting little round that we should probably touch on before we get too far. Where that 53 extension comes in from the river, where that bridge would ultimately be, there is a white space just above it that's a weird shaped piece. That is current farm field that's really just sitting there that the city of McHenry owns.
Yeah, we call that a park basically now. Is it used as a park? Not really. I
Is
mean,
it just in between those two right there?
yeah, it's
That whole parcel.
yeah, it's 17 acres.
That whole, 17 acres of that is actually, could be used as park, but again, at some point in time,
There's gonna be a.
there'll be ramps there.
Right, yeah, there'll be a road.
Well, the 53 is just below in purple.
Right.
The park, that at one time we tried to put the dog park there. Didn't work. It was an NIMBY type thing.
So that's a piece as well, that the city owns that property, it's 17 acres. So, you know, it's also something that we could ultimately at some point in time probably do something with. It's off of Riverside Drive, it is accessible on the north side of town, between McCollum Lake Road and Riverside is, you know, it's right there. The other thing that will happen as we kind of dial in these other areas is we also need to be thinking about expanding that 1.5 miles outside of our range. So that's something to just keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah,
What's the
right.
other little parcel there?
Yeah, that little farmette.
What is that?
That's,
Where's that at?
that's Abel's.
That's the farm that didn't annex when Riverside Hollow was
Able,
developed.
I can keep.
Oh, right
where
before
that's at.
McCollum Lake Road there?
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Where's 53 and Riverside Drive? Where does that come in?
Right at that park.
Yeah, so Riverside Drive.
But I mean, as you're going down, you know,
Riverside Drive. right
Riverside
here.
Drive.
So it would be.
Right here.
It would be, what's the nearest
Like
cross?
past Scott Avenue?
It's right,
Schneider.
it'd be right past Schneider. So
Oh,
it's
that's
just
further.
after
Okay,
Schneider
I got you.
Estates. So kind of,
All right.
is that, or is it past Bolton Saddle?
No,
You
I
know
think
what
it's
might
south
be-
of that.
What might be helpful on these maps?
Street
So
names?
well,
Some street names and
Yeah.
maybe some.
I hand wrote some of
I
the
know.
street names.
Yeah, I got 'em
Some
written down.
designation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think that's it.
okay, that, I didn't even notice the street.
So, but I think,
Because I know where that curve on Riverside Drive is.
right, Joe, so it's before the curve, right? So we're past McCollum Lake Road, and we're just past Schneider Estates.
Right.
The adjacent neighborhood there is before we get outside of city limits. So the last neighborhood there that's in city limits is actually,
I don't even think it's before Schneider Estates.
it's before Schneider. It's actually, the 53 extension would be the backside of Riverside Hollow.
Right, and it's directly north of Oaks of McHenry.
Right. So that would be, is that, it's not Arbor there, is it? Does Arbor loop all the way through?
Yeah, I think, that's Arbor, Dorothy?
I'm not sure.
It's
What were you on?
clearly spelled out on
I
this.
was
It's usually Riverside Hollow.
You can
I
see
was
it
on
clearly
Cumberland.
on this map.
opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Arbor's the one that goes through the middle, I don't know what one is that goes.
Oh,
I think Hemlock connects all the way around. It's Hemlock all
Oh,
the way
I
around.
was talking Oaks and McHenry, oh. Yeah, I get the street name.
Hemlock ends at the street that comes
Does
out
it?
from Riverside Drive at the end, yeah.
You know what, I got the street name right here.
Oh, you got it, yeah, you got that one. I have that one too. I'll have to get my readers out.
Yeah, I was
Yes,
like,
you
good
will.
luck on that one. Ninja eyes.
So Arbor.
It is Arbor.
Arbor is just south
Yeah.
of the 53 extension.
Okay, I know what that's at.
It's before Scott.
So this is Arbor right here.
So this would be 53.
Yep.
This is Arbor. So literally those backyards right now, we're looking into the cornfield. And then this would be what we're considering park. So that's Arbor, Riverside Hollows, and
So right
that's the
here.
last street. So those properties are actually gonna eventually back that if it comes.
Very nice.
They'll love that.
Man, he's got some clout.
I don't know, how did I get
See
this
that in my
thing?
life.
We like him.
Actually got names on it.
There you go. You're all set, Butch. I got this one and I just need to get my readers out of my pocket now.
Wow.
Big.
That must've been from the first meeting.
So as far as the downtown marketplace, would everybody agree with the line of thinking on the properties, the two parcels that would be behind the current Aldi Kohl's building? Would that make more sense for those to be RS1 or some residential instead of commercial with no visibility? Yeah, yeah, these two parcels.
And we don't even have to say what kind of residential.
Right, it could just be residential. We just need to earmark it with something. Did you find one, Ryder? Yeah. I'm gonna be Mr. Sabota tonight.
I bet he thought the meeting was at 7:30.
I'm gonna be Mr. Sabota
Did he think the
tonight.
meeting
Yeah.
was at 7:30?
Hey, by the way, the meeting was at 7.
I bet he thought it was at 7:30.
My email highlighted 7 PM.
Sorry, Mike.
Sorry about that.
Sorry,
You're covered.
I probably confused you. That's your packet for next
We
week.
should probably start over.
These aren't.
Yeah.
I'll catch up.
Confusing my language map. We're just talking about the future land use map and these two maps right here.
The only thing on that being all residential, you do have, if this is 53, that's on the highway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
So,
I think
The
at
possible
that
front
point,
part could be something.
right, there won't be
Oh,
any
you got a
egress
little
though.
bit.
Yeah, there won't be an egress, it'll be at 31.
Smart man.
The only egress will be
Safety.
further on.
Yeah, so did I.
You could tie it in with Blake for sure. The only issue becomes though, again, my visibility, I would think that if they do the 53 section, they're gonna put a 12-foot high
There's extra
solid
packets.
surface wall up there.
Oh, you need a packet, Mike?
Right, so then my visibility probably comes
No,
down.
he's looking for
anyway.
street names.
Again, and this is nothing permanent. This is literally,
Behind the call.
we're looking at what we should earmark future.
Oh, right here.
Doesn't mean it's gonna stay that
Right
way.
here.
The only problem is by the time they do 53, the only commercial you'll need is your computer.
This is,
Right, exactly. They'll be droning the stuff to your house.
no, that's up here. This is Oaks and McHenry, this is Chestnut, this is Birch, this is Pine, this is,
Well,
this is McCollum, this is McCollum Road. So this is Oaks and McHenry, these streets are stubbed in.
These two and then this is residential, oh, this is the hard.
Where's Blake?
That's this one?
So that's gonna be that piece,
That
yeah.
one.
So this is
Okay.
53.
Right.
And that's the car.
Oh.
And is that part of what we're talking about too, or no?
Well, we're talking about right here,
Actually,
and right
dog
here.
park is-
The land behind Coles and
Yeah.
the lake on.
So Coles is like right here.
so
Oh,
this is
uh-huh.
53.
So we're talking here and here.
Okay.
You know, the crazy thing is.
So if you were to look at that parcel,
It's
that
never
would
really
be
grown
probably
in my
the dog
lifetime.
park is
Today we're
here.
talking about that when I was a kid.
They're making a push to at least get it to 1-to-1.
Oh, might do that.
I don't know if it's gonna
Yeah,
happen.
I think that's what that is. So the dogs will have to hear it from the road noise.
The dogs will have to be careful.
Oh, the dogs won't be there if 53 goes through.
No, we will move it.
Yeah, we have to, that's just temporary. I mean, that would be.
Well, so then, at that point, we should leave that Riverside Drive location at 17
Yeah.
acres alone, because we have to move it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Why didn't it go before there?
Residential opposition.
To have a dog park? Okay.
That was like the third location. It was Riverside Hollow. Where else did we propose?
I'd much rather look at the dog park than 53, but okay.
So Doug, at one time, probably before 2008, when Target was looking for another spot, like going down Blake behind, it would be Burger King, Steak and Shake, the car wash. Wasn't Target looking at that spot? Because those are kind of spotty, you know, there's not like a solid wall through there, but I know they were looking back there, and you hate to shun a big development like that from coming in.
They wouldn't. I proposed behind Burger King, right behind Burger King, to a couple people. Retailers even shunned that location, even though it was higher up. If they weren't on the road, they didn't like it.
Well, I think we're seeing the results of that in the Dick's, location as well. I mean,
Yeah, those are solid walls there, but here you got building.
Well,
For
even
sure.
if you had a building though south of Aldi, it still wouldn't go behind. It still wouldn't go behind where we're talking
behind
about.
you.
I'm talking behind Burger King.
Yeah.
Steak and
Yeah.
Shake,
Yeah, I mean,
that other part, you're right, that could go residential.
you certainly could leave that commercial in hopes. It's very difficult to get something commercial to go there, but that could certainly be commercial.
Yeah, you probably have that one parcel next to Aldi that would be behind the Burger King next to Aldi on close enough visibility to 31.
Yeah, and then on the south side of Blake,
Right, south side of Blake.
go as far as deep as you want to go. but
Exactly.
I would stop it at Blake Boulevard, line it up going south with Blake, basically.
At the end of Blake.
Right.
But again, I mean, and I think the difference is, as long as Doug's having conversations with the commercial entities that are looking for locations, again, this is really just, hey, what are we gonna do with this big parcel? It should probably be residential. But again, that front little spot there, that's easy enough to sell off and clip into a whole nother deal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I think we should leave that area for that. anyway.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you could certainly chop it up into two pieces and have cut it off like we're Blake.
Who owns that? I mean, that's,
Blake, Joe Blake.
oh, they do.
Yeah, it's
Got
like
it.
32 acres.
Okay.
Other than that, residential, and the rest of it, I think.
Excellent. Anyone opposed to that idea? Excellent. I think the other question was just on the north edge of that 53 extension, there's that weird triangle piece that we talked about that was a little bit wet.
This one there.
That's an area that's current, Doug, what is that current zone?
C5.
So that is currently zone C5. I mean, literally the engineering cost of building on that would probably be
Probably,
horrific.
yeah, I mean, it's mostly wetlands.
Could you, is there a specific spot in that land, Doug, that is the area that would be the problem? Is it in the center? Do you know where the water table looks like in that lot?
No, I mean,
It's just all wet,
Who
right?
owns the property?
I think Blake.
Dog
I think another Blake.
Dog park.
Dog park.
The dog park?
Make it a park.
Well, I'd hate
Well, at
to,
this point, but,
I'd hate to,
I mean, if you got a problem with the soil,
yeah, but I'd hate to designate it a park. It's kind of, you're going from commercial to a park. You got, if you look to the east, you got some residential. And you could have more residential. You could conceivably build a cluster type development and most of it remain wetland. I mean, I definitely,
residential is probably the only other fit.
Residential would be, yeah, the only other fit. I mean, I'd
And
hate.
it would be small volume anyway,
Right, I mean, if it's a park, it basically becomes,
nothing.
right.
I was just listening to the conversation, you guys sounded like it was totally unbuildable, so.
See, I don't wanna say that. It's.
I think the question is no one knows.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Until somebody actually does soils there, I think it's gonna be a pretty big question mark.
I would put something like, we came up with environmentally, wetlands residential, because we do know there's wetlands there.
Anyone opposed to that idea?
And you said the dog park originally was, they were looking there?
No, not there.
Oh, I know that.
The one on,
Here.
our piece right here, that's 17 acres.
Right, okay.
So that'd be the 53 extension
Yeah,
at some point in
yeah,
time.
yeah.
You could still access it from Riverside, that'd be the other 17 acres. So,
Right.
like Doug said, right now, this is the dog park location. And if 53 comes in, they'll probably mix that, cause that would be, I'm gonna guess egress there.
Right,
You know, that we would have ramp there.
right,
We could potentially move it there, that park isn't, right now it's just farm field.
right.
But it is earmarked for park now.
Mhm.
And it is, I mean, I think that would be a great location if we had to move it. Let's see. The other piece that I thought was a little bit interesting, if we look underneath the Peterson Park header at the very north edge of the map at the top here, just below that, there are 6 parcels that are not in the city limits. One of the interesting things about those lots is that they're pretty deep lots. Does everybody know where we're at here?
Yeah.
On this map, these lots here.
Right.
So Doug and I had just chatted a little bit about these. You know, it's interesting, those lots, we've got, Evergreen is the street there. What is the name of that development?
Evergreen Park.
Evergreen Park. So that townhouse development that's there, it's the adjacent properties just to the west of that. You know, I think this is where we look at that mixed use possibility. Current zoning doesn't allow for multi-use on one lot. But I think in the future, with the depth of those lots, you know, you could potentially have some commercial up front and residential in the you know, rear area, or the north area of those lots. Yeah, these lots here. And so at that point, you know, that's where Doug and I had just kind of said, you know, maybe in the future, we are going to have to look at a multi-use on one parcel. Because what do you do with the size of these parcels? As we continue to grow, now we've got a townhouse development right next door. I don't see us digging holes on these lots in a hurry, but at some point in time, someone's going to want to do something, and they do have commercial availability on the front because they are on McCollum Lake Road.
No.
Well, 30 years from now, we don't know.
30 years from now?
We have these pockets all over McHenry and, you know, ever since I can remember.
Yeah.
They are not interested in, you know,
Right.
it would be a, you know, I'd hate to guess, but probably be the same thing out there too, if they're.
Yeah.
Just.
Well, you got access to a light on that one? I mean, technically, that could access that light.
From Blake and McCollum Lake Road?
Yeah.
You drive in and turn left?
Yeah, you could, and then you got the parcel to the Knox farm to the south, and then you got the 5 acre, 6 acre parcel that's just, west of the gas station. All 3 of those parcels could conceivably be that mixed use category. I mean, you don't know what, if you say commercial, or residential, you just don't know.
And so that's the issue as well. So if you look at the lots we're talking about, and you come just a little farther down, there's the next parcel that's on the path. It's in the yellow shaded, but it is actually pink. That's the old King's Farm.
King Farm.
Right, so that's on the corner of Blake and McCollum Lake Road,
Right.
right? It's currently on the market, it's being advertised. It's been on the market for quite some time. It's a 4 acre parcel, so it's not huge, and it's been a farm for a long time. But ultimately, The lot just to the east is designated as an outlot right now. Then we've got one more lot from there, that's actually designated detention area.
Right.
Now, that's what backs Fifth Third Bank and Meyer Gas is the next parcels to the east. But that detention obviously is not going to get built, that's gonna have to remain. But the outlot, King's Farm, those together could be a fairly large development.
Yeah, it's commercial.
So that, I mean,
Doesn't
it's
somebody have an
currently
option on that, or
C4.
doesn't somebody own that one lot to the west of the detention?
The outlot?
Meyer owns it.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So again, that's our thought process on those other lots that are kind of a little farther to the north and to the west is, well, what if somebody wanted to come in there and make a big development? I mean, they could, but if we just said, look, there's a mixed use possibility there at some point
Mixed
in time in
use,
the future.
how are you gonna label it mixed use? What's the mixed use?
Well,
We don't have one yet.
we were thinking, when we do the comp plan amendment, we do the actual narrative, we have to define, we wanna leave it open a little bit. We don't wanna pigeonhole the category, but we wanna define it, meaning it could be residential, could be commercial, could be both. But, you know, we wanna give some guidelines, but we don't wanna define, we don't wanna be too specific.
I think with the townhouse property to the east of it, it lays itself out as being multifamily.
Well, and that's what we wrote, that's what I wrote down as well, multifamily or mixed.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, maybe they don't wanna build townhouses right on McCollum Lake Road.
Right.
Maybe they did a strip center on the front section
Might make
and then
sense.
built towns in the back, right?
Right.
That would make more, again, now that
But
becomes
if you're
into
gonna-
that
yeah,
mixed use.
If you're gonna do a mixed use, though, you gotta identify, I think, a little bit more.
For sure, yeah.
Stringently what the mixed use is gonna be. Is it gonna be mixed use multifamily, mixed use single family? and commercial?
Well, but if you put townhomes and they say, can we build townhomes and commercial, it's just that you don't wanna say, well, now you're deviating from what it says. That's what we're trying to avoid.
No, that's what I said. I mean, fine, the mixed use, but you gotta identify one's commercial, one is either single family commercial mixed use or multifamily commercial mixed use.
Okay,
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying,
okay,
you know, blow them away totally.
yeah,
Yeah, and again, I think that's kind of the next phase of this project, is right now is identifying what properties we really need to look at, and then when we rewrite the comp plan and we look at what that looks like, then we start to really come up with some definitions of what those need to be.
yeah, I agree with you, Butch. I mean, I do think that's important because I don't see single family homes here.
Not there, no.
No, yeah. But with the towns adjacent, I think that could actually make sense to do a strip center in the front along
Yeah.
McCollum Lake Road, and then have townhouse extensions behind.
Sure.
If you look at other communities do that a lot, so I mean, that was kind of my thought process there, whether that be multifamily or mixed, and how we define that would come once we get that far.
Right.
And then, of course, we've got all the Peterson Park area there, so really nothing to identify on that section that I saw. The majority of the rest of that whole west area is pretty well defined on what we're looking at on this map. I mean, there's really not a lot of changes that I think we could probably come up with on those realms.
There's a vacant lot behind my house. They're gonna turn it into a soccer field, right?
Oh, that's a park.
That's still going? Oh, that's where they plant corn.
Yeah, but it's a park, it's designated as
Is
a
it
park.
designated as a park? Okay.
Yes.
I thought they had a deal going where somebody was gonna start a soccer league or something there.
If it's
Oh, the
designated
city owns
park.
it though.
Right.
I don't, I don't know.
Oh, okay. It's a rumor.
I did hear something about soccer, but to be honest, I don't know enough to,
It's just a rumor I heard. Some people in this, you know, this youth sports thing, they were talking about it.
I did hear about a soccer, but I don't know enough about
There.
it. The 21 acre Kunat property.
Moon Creek Circle.
Got it. Got it. So I think on this west, where we have all of the pink highlights on this section, I think there's not a ton to change in that realm. Most of that zoning, most of the residential, most of what's over there, I don't really see a whole lot of changes. Does anybody have any additions or changes that they think should happen on that area of town? Yeah, well, pretty much just this whole what's left is, I mean, it's kind of all built out. There's really not gonna be anything where we would be earmarking to change in that realm. So if we come back to kind of near the number 1 area here, where we've got the Zaxter station on Main Street and kind of from Fort McHenry in that area, I think this is where we start talking about the historic district and what we want that to look like and how we designate that to be. And again, that really, it's just a concept to talk about tonight, but then knowing that when we have that comp plan rewrite, we would have to actually designate what that would be.
And I think I would put on the map, even if it wasn't narratively, but in the comp plan narratively I would, but on the map I would put something like historic Gagetown, to put that we want this area to be reflective of the architecture that's existing. And then we would get more into what that means in the comp plan.
Because I think we're talking about all the real downtown market. I mean, you know, Main Street, Waukegan.
Right.
Those homes that are all, you know, where we have quite a few plot homes in that area already.
And that's kind of the Main Street, Waukegan Street area.
Right, that's really the gist of that. Even John Street, a handful of those houses on John are pretty old as well.
Yeah.
Not all of them though, that's the interesting part. There's a handful of
Right.
stuff that's existing, and then you do get some stuff that was built much later. But I think having that historic district, and as Commissioner Doherty talked about last time as well, you know, we've got these things happening on the north side on 31 North, on Richmond Road, they're headed north. I mean, some of them are business, some of them are residential. Here we have a brand new house that just went up there that someone's gonna live in. I think the trend is headed currently back to living downtown and walking to everything. That doesn't mean that it'll be that way 15 years from now, but that's surely where it's going today.
That was kind of the impetus of doing this, is that people can rebuild homes, but we don't want them to, you know, we want to keep kind of the same look. If they want to rebuild a home, let's not lose all
The architectural
right.
character of that area. So if somebody wants to turn new plans in to build there, they need that structure to look architecturally, design that property to look like the adjacent property.
Well, they did a good job on that one on Richmond Road.
For sure, yeah,
It
they did a
blends
great
right
job.
in.
Yeah, it actually looks really nice, the covered front porch, I mean, they did a nice job on that property. I was shocked at how fast they got that thing down and back up.
So if someone came in and wanted to put a modern house in there, would that fit in the guidelines? What would you guys say if someone wanted to put like a, you know, a flat top roof?
Probably, no.
Does it
A
say
flat-
anything?
I got a problem with that.
A flat top roof I don't think would fit down there.
No, I know, but I'm like, is there anything in the guidelines that's?
Well, not currently, no.
Well, we do, I mean, we, depends what it was. If it's an infill or a tear down, we do have ordinances. If it's, it depends what they're doing. If
But
they're,
is there like architectural approval?
What if a guy
Sorry.
wanted to put a log home in there, it'd be a wild example. Obviously, it wouldn't aesthetically fit, but
Is there any
No,
historical
but
rules?
could you
in there?
stop him from doing it?
No, not if it fit the current guideline. As long as the height fit and the setbacks fit, I
right,
don't think we could stop that.
if
no.
it met the criteria, obviously, there's not much you can do.
Even the flat top roof, I mean, if it met the
Right.
criteria,
I
we
mean-
really can't limit that.
You know, I mean, you can state your intention, I mean,
Just cause you don't like it, Doug.
well, I mean, I just think, how many people you know put flat top roofs on?
Well, I mean, someone likes Frank Lloyd Wright.
Well, you never know.
Yeah, but that's not a flat top roof.
Well,
Who would ever think you could fence in the whole yard on Green Street?
Right.
Wow, things never die, do
But to Roger's point, though, I mean, that's a great example as well. If someone wants to put a log home up, I mean, ultimately,
they? He did talk about Lincoln before.
our current guideline wouldn't stop that. If the peak was less than 35 feet, it fit the setback requirements. You know, there's not really a way for
Right.
us to limit that.
Unless you had
Yeah.
architectural review or something.
Unless, well, again, creating that historic deal, like if it were on Waukegan, or it were on Maine, and if it were currently a historic home and they wanted to take that down and rebuild it, now there's some things in that.
Right.
But if it were an infill lot, or if it were just a traditional non-plaqued home that was not a Victorian, it was not in that era, I think that would probably just fly. I don't think that would be an issue.
So in that historical area, I think there's something that you should put in there for architectural review, I'm thinking.
Well, we've tried to do a historic district twice, and twice it failed miserably. I mean,
I mean, everything that's historic has been plaques.
yeah,
Almost
but,
Like 4 plaques.
but
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just out
The
of
rest of the
our-
stuff has been built from the 50s on forward.
Well, and honestly, no one wants to buy a plaqued house, no one wants to live in a plaqued house because the requirements are super tough.
Exactly.
Right,
I mean,
right.
that's the
So
issue.
why make it more difficult
Yeah.
for people to live in our town?
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
right.
right.
But the question becomes, if somebody wants to put up a super contemporary house on Main Street,
Yeah,
it's gonna stick out.
okay, that's probably why they wanna do it.
I
If
think
they own
Jim
the
wants
lot-
to do it.
On a spike now.
Yeah, he wants to build a flat roof.
Next meeting.
I just, sometimes I think
Yeah.
somebody buys a lot for 40 grand and you're gonna tell them what he can build on it. That's why I'm not a fan of subdivision covenants. I don't like those.
Well, that's why I think it failed, because I mean, I remember one of the comments was, I don't want you to tell me how I
Yeah.
can paint my house, what color I can paint my house, and that's the crux of why the districts failed. I think sometimes, you know, the Landmark Commission, God bless their souls,
Yeah.
they get a little bit too one way.
But the city has building ordinances in place.
Right.
So somebody has to abide by those building ordinances.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so if they abide by them, I don't think you should put further restrictions on them.
I don't remember how it turned out, but it was a few years back in Glencoe, they were having a problem, like on Dundee. People were buying the small house, cause they just wanted the land, and they demoed the house, and
Demoed
then
the
they were
house.
putting a monster up there.
Right.
And Glencoe's having a problem with that. How it was resolved, I really don't know, but I remember reading about that.
But they had to approve it in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's their
yeah.
fault.
Yeah. yeah.
Well, it's
That's
still
what I'm
happening
told.
today, though. I mean, I just talked to a client who, not one of my clients, but a local McHenry person, they have a family home in Arlington Heights. And the same thing's happening there. I mean, currently, it's an in-town lot in Arlington Heights.
Uh-huh.
And there's an old ranch home on it. It's in good shape.
Yeah.
It's on the market for $299. It was bought cash. They're tearing it down and putting up $1 million home.
Yeah.
So it's back. I mean, that whole thing is happening again, especially in that marketplace. I wish we were seeing $1 million homes coming to McHenry. I don't think that's gonna be happening anytime soon, but.
No, they stopped at Bull Valley.
Right, exactly. But Butch, I mean, I agree with you, but would you agree that earmarking at least the area, calling it the historic
Well,
district
the
or
historic
Gagetown, or-
district, sure.
yeah, I mean, just so that we know an area that we're talking about. Okay?
I mean, because it is.
It is, yeah, for sure, yeah.
You know, some of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was a surveyor out there. but they-
Oh, okay.
But to carry it a little bit farther, if you're gonna call it gauge on it, put restrictions on it. Okay, if you build this house, you have to put a hitching post in front.
Exactly, right,
You get carried away.
for sure. Does anybody have any questions on that area? Doug, what did I do down here? This is in the city, right?
Oh, that's the Cary property?
Oh, that's right, yeah, that's the Cary property, that's what we were trying to figure out, that was the country club and the Cary property.
And then the wastewater plant.
Yeah,
So we talked about the wastewater plant, that's being decommissioned, and then it'll eventually be redeveloped. And then Miller Point, we kind of had those as mixed use.
Anybody showing any interest in that?
Miller Point, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a great piece
so
of
we're making any
property.
progress, Doug? Or-
Yeah, slowly but surely.
Good.
Super.
So I think at that point though, I mean, we talked about just a handful of properties, the residential that we changed up north, the mixed use multifamily on the west edge up there, just to the right of the number 6. I think ultimately those changes are probably the biggest ones that we talked about tonight. I still think that 17-acre parcel that we own all the way on the east that is near that 53 extension, I think ultimately we need to just kind of consider that could have to be the next dog park.
Now, Doug, you said there was residential issues there.
Yeah.
I mean, when they first proposed it, were you there when they proposed that as a dog park?
But those residents are not in the city.
Beginning of the subdivision, but I never heard of it.
Well, it's,
What is a?
yeah,
this
Roger,
is not
it
the-
currently, it would have probably been the Riverside Hollow people, but they won't even have visibility to it if the 53 extension were to go in.
Right.
Cause
Yeah,
then I
and
would think
maybe,
that 53 extension would have a 12-foot high solid wall there.
Right, it could be a totally different thing.
So they wouldn't even know.
I mean, so maybe we should just put dog park.
I mean, ultimately, it's probably going to have to be that at some point in time.
Future dog park.
I mean, we're doing future land use, and
Right,
17 acres, I think it's a good location.
Well, I think it's a great location.
Well, it's all lowland, yeah, what else you can do?
Well, what else are you gonna do with it, right, Joe? I mean, there's really not a lot of other use for it, for sure.
So what do you have for the sewer plant? I'd like to view about that. What are you thinking about, the old sewer plant?
I did mixed use for now. I think it's gonna be a combination, I don't know.
Like,
gonna
how
be
how
great.
high can you
You
build a
got that, and you
building?
still got where
Can you
Joe
build like a
Keys was,
5-story, or
and
how
that's a
far,
nice
how high
piece
can you
of
go?
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's
With
a
an
nice-
apartment?
that's a
I
nice
mean,
piece of
that
property.
looks up
There's
two
current-
sides of the
there's
river.
current interest
Yeah.
there.
I think that would be
Yeah.
really a neat building.
Yeah. I mean, you don't wanna, you're right, that is a premier property.
Yeah.
Where the sewer plant is now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can look up both sides of the.
Oh, yeah.
Right, you can see
Down.
up and down the river.
How many, and how many slips could you get in there? I mean,
There's
that's,
about 100.
there's 100
Yeah.
there, yeah. I mean, that's a big,
And you
that's
got
a
the
big
country club on the
development.
other side.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
a,
That's a prime piece.
Well, I think by then we'll probably see them sell off hole number 1. If that happens, they'll reconfigure that, is my guess.
now that tree's gone, yeah. It's not been the same without that tree on.
That
front of the
tree's
fairway.
huge.
Any other questions for what we talked about tonight thus far?
Other than the street names, do people think that this format of this blown up map is fairly usable?
I think so, if we had, like you said, if you had the streets on there.
I like this size though.
Yeah, the side,
This is a nice one right here.
yeah, it is.
Like this, that size?
Yeah, maybe the mock-up of that, but this size.
Cause it might get kinda blown out of proportion.
Well, yeah, it would be super big if we only did the yellow area here
Yeah.
inside the box. But I think, Joe, if you're looking at this one that size though,
Yeah, that one, that size.
that's ultimately what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just the Sue Miller sized one that you have.
Yeah, you want it on the wall?
That was in a previous
Oh,
page.
yeah, this is a good one here too.
Yeah.
Just the street names.
Now, if we're gonna put the street names on here, is there any way either to have an overlay that will have existing zoning on here? Or?
Well, I mean, we've got all the maps, you have
no.
all the
This is
maps.
ideal.
I just caution you that the more we add, the more cluttered it becomes.
I think this one's ideal.
That's the first one we had.
Yeah, that's the one I was just pulling up.
I mean, that's existing land use.
This is the current existing land use.
Land use, yeah.
I mean, we don't wanna get confused with zoning and land use.
True. I
That-
take
that-
back my comment.
That's why I hate to put zoning on it.
Okay.
But I do think it's nice to have the zoning with it. If you do have, does everybody have the zoning map?
Yeah, somewhere.
Somewhere.
Cause it is nice to have the zoning map.
That's the Sue section.
Yeah, that's a Sue map.
Any chance we could take over like a conference room or something with this stuff and just have it up on the wall or?
You got the table
If
there.
you want, we could meet in,
We could make the executive. couldn't
You know,
yeah,
that
we
way-
could meet in back there if you wanted, or the classroom.
I mean,
If
just-
you could do on tables and look at each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
put it up on walls and we can all have one map of the zone and,
Actually, we probably meet in the classroom, might be easier, cause then we can put the tables in a U and maybe pin the map on the wall. It might be easier than going, you know what property I'm talking about?
right, exactly.
Well, and we could have
I
the
got three somewhere.
computer set up and have a Athena, so if we were looking.
Yeah, we
at
could
it,
do,
show a
so,
little
yeah,
bit
we could
more
do
of
that.
the
Very
visual.
good, we'll give Jim all types of credit for
Thank
that.
you.
Want to send an email out on that?
Yeah.
Do you want an
I will
email
send
from
three
me
of them.
too?
Can we get 3 emails? That would be nice.
And a flat roof.
And
The
Mike
flat
will
roof.
come later.
Flat roof.
Just
Wait.
kidding.
That's all right.
Thank God we don't have an audience.
I am
I had
recording.
enough of the audience last time.
You're not taking notes, are you?
It doesn't really matter to me, though. I mean, we just really need to pick one.
What's that?
Just the next, which portion we look at next. I mean, we wanted to look at this downtown first and really
Yeah.
kind of see, is there anything we really need to address in this downtown marketplace? But because it's already pretty well developed, there's really
Yeah.
not a lot to change. I think
It was the outliers.
What's
it's the
your,
outliers that
Yeah.
become,
What's your opinion, Doug, on what's gonna be developed next? South, north, east, west?
Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot of residential. I think the development of the residential eventually is going southwest, but that's not happening right now. I almost think we should just go directly adjacent to the south and or to the west, either to the pink or the blue. And just kind of keep going out into the south.
Okay.
So either pick the blue area or the pink area and then,
well, I think we should look at the blue area. Well, I guess, Doug, my bigger question is, let's make the determination on what we're looking at by the expiration of those,
Yes.
the boundary agreements, because that's actually the bigger key. Let's look at boundary agreement expirations, because we have a couple that are coming up, right?
yes, we do.
And I don't know if I have that one with me,
What, the boundary agreement?
the boundary agreements. Oh, yeah, here. We got, March of 2019 on Ringwood, and then Johnsburg, September of 19. So.
23 is the first? 1923?
So we got,
Yeah.
no, 2019.
2019?
So we got 2019, there's a pair of them, we've
So
got
we got
Ringwood
Ringwood
to
and
the north,
Johnsburg.
and to the northwest, we've got Ringwood,
Johnsburg.
and then Johnsburg, so maybe we should go north for, just because of the timing, if you will.
Yeah.
Those are the next two to expire, maybe we should head that direction first.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Where would Johnsburg be on, 31 and Chapel Hill Road?
It's gonna
Doesn't
be,
have to be.
yeah, so Johnsburg starts just north of Dick's.
Okay.
So we've got the street that goes in for Dick's, everything to the north of that is Johnsburg.
Oh, and then Riverside, and then,
Over to Riverside, right?
and then over.
So Johnsburg is, Johnsburg goes all the way up here.
And then the Chapel Hill Road.
So that current boundary agreement,
September 2019.
right, and so that one runs up. It's a really weird boundary as well, cause it kinda cuts out the train
And then it goes to the east.
portion, and then it goes weirdly up and then to the east.
Where is it, where's the boundary on Chapel Hill?
It's a weird.
It's east of Chapel Hill.
Yeah, that is a weird line.
It's a section line over to the east.
Is,
It's right here.
there's a middle school, yeah, so.
Look at that one,
Oh.
turn way
It
back.
heads this way.
East of the golf course
Yeah.
that they bought.
That's gotta be like, Stilling Woods?
Yeah, it's east of Stilling Woods.
It heads east of Stilling Woods, it takes a little jog to the north around Stilling Woods, that's Lakemore,
Right.
but then it does jut back up.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the first parcel to look at, would be, what do we need to do there, and then looking at that, the buffer, do you guys all have this future map? It's kinda small, but that's the one that has the boundaries on it. So that one, that I'm colorblind, so I'm gonna say it's purple. That's kind of in the background there. That's that 1.5 mile buffer zone, if you will, that we can plan into and start to look at.
Yeah, I almost hate to say this, but maybe we should look at the 1.5 mile boundary area. You know.
Before
we kind of, as kind of an interim step, because in looking at these boundary agreements, they really don't fall within these areas. It's really within our 1.5 mile that we're concerned about. And they fall within our 1.5 mile.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what we should be concerned about for the next portion. And then we can also look at the next portion, but I think we need to look at the 1.5 mile. We can't forget about the 1.5 mile.
Well, I think one of the things, when you really start to identify what we're looking at, even on what we just reviewed, there's not a lot of change that's gonna happen to what's currently here. Most of the areas we're looking at that are empty parcels are already residential or commercial, they're already either on frontage or they're not. I don't see us making a lot of major changes in those, but those boundary restrictions are, and those agreements that are going to expire are going to be an issue.
Yeah, that's kind of.
Well, I'm gonna get 17 more of them, Butch.
Are you?
Yeah. I don't know, cause I like
Oh.
these.
You can have mine, I ripped it. I get you a better one.
That's all we're talking
So I think the Johnsburg boundary map and the Ringwood one are the two.
about. Oh, I got it.
Did you find it? Oh, yeah, that one's legible. Let me get you my readers, Butch.
It was in the, it was in one of the 3 emails I got.
So I think those two, would everybody agree that that's probably the next best thing to look at, is that. The Johnsburg one specifically, I think, because that one, there's areas in that marketplace that are probably going to be closer to change, closer to Johnsburg looking to take some more of that as well. Where on the Ringwood front, I don't really see a lot of activity.
So should we zoom in on that and get a map of just that area, you know, and put like where Chapel Golf Course is and where?
Yeah, Doug, would it be available for us to maybe just get a blow up of that?
Yeah, I could do that.
That might be
You want this
perfect.
one too?
And maybe one for Ringwood too.
Yeah, and then one for Ringwood as well, if you're gonna have them do them. Maybe we could get that, and that would probably help us really identify, okay, in that, what is out there? What are we talking about? And then Doug, tell me, because I'm a total rookie at this whole boundary agreement thing. What happens in that? I mean, are we literally stating that we're going to be looking to make that stride into those areas before Johnsburg lays claim? Is that kind
No,
of?
I mean, those are agreements that are in place now that says, if a property comes in on this side, it's developed in McHenry, if it comes in this side, it's developed in Johnsburg. When the time comes up that date expires, it's a free-for-all unless you enter into another agreement.
Got it.
So really,
Well,
what you know, Derek and the mayor have to do are kind of approach the entities, Johnsburg and Ringwood, and say, let's renegotiate our boundary agreements. So we don't have developers, when development gets ripe again, playing us against them to establish our boundaries, so.
Okay, so commissioners, I guess so the goal would be in looking at the areas is, what do we foresee happening there? So that boundary line is really to identify who's gonna capture that tax revenue of whatever happens in those areas. So in thinking about that, the concept is, what could potentially go in those areas, and what would there be for gain for the city, if you will, if we were to have an agreement in place that it stayed with us?
Yeah, I guess I would just assume that the boundary agreements are gonna stay as they are. Because we don't know any different.
so the boundary agreement is currently the dotted line with the orange?
Yeah, the Johnsburg is the orange.
So, like, we were just talking about, the golf course, is on the McHenry side.
So, so some of the boundary agreements have properties that have language in them that says that certain properties, because of certain reasons, mainly because of utilities or FPAs, facility planning areas, can go to one municipality or the other.
That was the case of the golf.
So it's
That was the case.
shared almost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the case of the golf course. So Johnsburg could not service the golf course with water and sewer. Only the city of McHenry can.
Okay.
So if
Really?
it annexes,
Are you kidding me?
no.
You don't think they're gonna build a sewer plant there?
They already
In
have one.
Johnsburg?
That's
Yeah, but they
Chapel
can't
Hill.
service it. It's on the other side of the river. Or I don't even know where it is.
That's why they bought it, to build a sewer plant so they could service the other side of the river in Johnsburg.
Well,
That's a long way.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a
Bye.
long way.
Couple, 3 years from now, give me a call.
With the money they make off
I-
the golf course?
I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not saying anything.
I'm not
Okay,
saying
don't say
that
it.
either.
So does everybody understand like the realm of what that's about? Looking at that boundary line area, does it need to be expanded, does it stay the same? And what gain would we ultimately have in potential land use of those areas?
Well, on the agreement, when you establish a new agreement,
If we do.
if you
Yeah.
do, the timeframe, you know, how many years does it go out? Is that?
Usually 20, but you can make it less. But I think it's good that we go through this process, because if we find, oh man, this piece of land is vital, like, maybe it would, that's why I think it's vital we go through this process, get this map adopted, get it through the public hearing process, get it to the city council, because, you know, at least we're in 2018 now.
Mhm.
You know, then, you know, obviously, you know, we point these things out, and because these are very important. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think these boundary agreements would come up.
So we're gonna get copies of the boundary agreements too, then, right? Along with the map.
If you want them, I mean, they're,
Well, we should know what we're dealing with, right?
I think it would be interesting to understand what it is that we're dealing with.
if you want, it's fine with me.
Are they lengthy?
No,
Or a synopsis of them, you know?
Yeah.
You certainly
Like you
can have a
said,
copy,
the Chapel
I mean-
Hill thing was shared, you know.
yeah,
key
yeah,
points
they're
in it.
about 3 pages, and then they have a map with a line on it.
Okay.
Is that something
Didn't
emailable?
you,
Sure.
Everybody okay with
Yeah.
email on that?
Yeah.
didn't you say that we don't have one with Lakemore?
We don't. The only ones we don't have are Lakemore and Wonder Lake, the two
Okay.
that we need the most. Actually, I wouldn't say we need the most, it would just be, it would make sense to have. But, you know,
Well, it's interesting also, the other one that's gonna be a little bit
Yeah.
interesting is the Bull Valley one. I mean, there's some boundaries there. We have an agreement that expires in 2022. But with that municipality and the condition it's in today, I'm wondering what's gonna happen with that.
Yeah.
yeah, cause you think of the politicians, you know, who were in place at the time we did these, certainly things have changed.
Well, not only that, but I mean, even just what's happened with the Village of Bull Valley
Right.
in the last couple of years, I mean, that.
Oh, so these were done like 20 years ago?
Right.
Oh, yeah,
These
yeah,
are older,
yeah.
yeah.
Huda was mayor, I think.
What are they gonna do with that?
Yeah,
When they
yeah,
were
he had,
older, I think, yeah.
for the Johnsburg one, for sure, I know he was for that one.
So, yeah, a little bit interesting.
So the Ringwood and Johnsburg.
Yeah, if you could get Chad to kind of, even if they just cut this off and just gave us that, you know, blown just the top lines up.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was north of 120, it'd be easier to see.
Sure. Better get it on here from Sue.
Miller?
Yeah.
We'll just
Big
print
enough,
her bigger.
if it's big.
We'll put it on a wall.
Okay.
Fathead.
You're running for all of it.
A fat-
No more
a fat
discussion.
head.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody have any additional questions or concerns of this topic at this point?
I have another location I wanted to ask about.
Go ahead.
Metro, what are you thinking about trains? Any sort of build up in that area on Main Street? Crystal Lake in Maine, the old lumber yard, anything?
It was under
Something to
contract,
Think about
I
that
believe.
area.
Mentions nothing anytime soon.
Okay.
It's just, they're under, maintain existing infrastructure. The old lumber yard, trying. It's just a tough one. Had a few possibilities, it just,
It's a good piece of property.
It is.
It's in bad shape.
It's a tough property.
It's an odd
Yeah,
shape.
it's
Yeah,
a problem.
it's-
Yeah,
people, the access is
we
tough.
need a Sonic.
So Doug, if businesses want all along like roadside visual, I don't know,
Visibility.
Visibility on, North 31, does anybody ever look at South 31?
Yeah. And 120,
Yeah?
like Arby's wants to be on 120.
Okay.
Somebody just told me that 1,000 acres in Prairie Grove, there's a developer looking at it now.
I heard that too.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Where the water tower is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
flower, whatever, wildflower.
We'll see if that actually goes. They'll move the light, they'll put a light in at Edgewood and they'll close Ames. They'll move Ames north, they'll swing it north into that development and actually have a light at Edgewood, and then that will be the connection back into Prairie Grove. That's 1,034 acres, I believe, and if they do that, that'll be a huge development, and at that point, again, that's one that we wanna look at, what that south boundary creates for us, because that's the buffer that we need to be looking at.
Oh, that's where we got all the land.
Right, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot down there at this point.
Yeah.
We have a
Just
boundary
get
agreement.
one major
with Prairie
development
Grove.
down there, the rest is, it's just gonna be.
It's a free-for-all, but we
Yeah.
do have a boundary agreement currently with Prairie Grove,
Yeah.
so.
It's right at the edge of, it's just south of that 19 acres that Paul Bachman has listed.
Oh, so they come pretty far north, huh?
Yeah, it's just north of 2022, South Route 31,
Which is Morgan Hill.
Morgan Hill, just south of
So
Morgan.
just south
yeah,
of Morgan Hill, so Prairie Grove runs all the
Yeah.
way up to there.
So it has Pacini's 240 acres, that's it. It comes right up to it.
So, but then, so Prairie Grove has everything south of that.
Yeah, everything south of that.
Both sides of the road?
Yeah, they have,
Oh, yeah.
they have the west side as well.
So where's that, by
Yeah.
the farmhouse?
Yeah, right by the farmhouse.
South of the farmhouse.
Just the south property of it, though.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever I leave my house, everything is north of 120. Everything is north of 120.
Yeah.
Except Walgreens, and I hate going. I told my wife, I'll divorce you if you ever take me to that drive-through at Walgreens again. Oh, God. I hate it.
Isn't that a nice
I go-
drive-through?
Yeah, but when I go to it, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, it's just me.
Yeah.
you
That's
know?
a great
She's-
time to go,
she's
there's
got
no
me-
one ever there.
Exactly, she's got me going at 2 o'clock in the Saturday.
Oh, that's the worst time to go.
Oh, my God.
So any other questions on item number 5 on the actual comp plan that we're looking at now? Doug, anything other than the next
Thank
meeting
you
is
for
March
your input.
14th, 7:30. We do have items on that agenda. Your packet was just handed out this evening. Do we have one? Did you leave one for Mr. Sabota as well?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, I'm gonna bring it to him in half an hour.
And I have some.
Whoa.
I'm just kidding.
It's a tough crowd. It's a tough.
I'll make up for it, I'll be half hour early.
And our next meeting's gonna be in a U-shaped room.
The next
This
one
one.
of these,
That
so,
means-
so that's what I'd like to schedule now, is we
Yeah.
have a March 14th planning and zoning, which is just a couple of weeks away.
Next week.
Oh yeah, next week.
Next.
Yeah, wait for the week.
That's how fast it is.
We have a question in the packets. We email them all to you, and we deliver them. Are you okay with the email and being handed your paper copies? Have your paper copies in your places the night of? Or is there a reason, would anybody object to that?
No. I'm okay.
Rather than mailing them and emailing them?
I would love to pick one up.
Well,
Or
we
would you like
could
to pick them up?
deliver, we could.
I mean, we're just kinda looking at, rather than mail isn't working, so.
As long as in the email, if you've got the agenda and the listing of what's
Right.
gonna happen, because not sometimes, you like to go through it before you get to the meeting and have a
Yeah.
general idea.
Yeah.
But we don't have to have a paper copy if it's gonna be in the email.
Well, that's what I'm,
Can have a
if we
PDF,
email you
so.
the entire packet, packet.
Right.
Oh, sure, and then just
Do
leave
you
a paper
need
packet here.
I mean, cause we can email the entire packet and then have the hard copies of that packet at
Fine with
your
me.
spots.
I'm good with that.
I would like, Dorothy, I would love to pick one up ahead of time, only
Same here.
because
And that's fine.
my issue is, since I'm the one running the meeting, I really wanna have it ahead of time, cause I mark it up. So for me, I'd like to have it ahead of time.
And we can do it for everybody if you want, we just thought we did.
No, but I think if everybody else is okay with it, I'll just pick mine up. I mean, I'm up here often enough that it's really not an issue.
Same here, I pick one up or.
I
whatever.
pick it up. The sooner I have it, the sooner I get it,
I do much
paper.
better with paper.
Yeah.
So you're better with, okay, okay,
I'm good with an email, don't send anybody to my door.
okay.
I like,
I do like.
I like
to look
seeing
at it.
paper and I like,
I do like
gravel.
to look at it ahead of time, just to
Big
become
fan of
familiar with
gravel.
it. If I wanna go drive by somewhere, I can go drive by
Exactly.
So
somewhere.
you'd rather have the paper copy ahead of time?
No,
not
I'm good with the
email
email.
copy?
I'm good with the email. You
Because
can
we
have it
have
waiting
been
here.
emailing
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
packet
You
as
can print them
well.
out if you want a paper copy.
And then I talked to Tina, and I think she clarified with Doug, like, when the petition stuff goes out, I got
Yep.
hit for the third time, walked into a restaurant, and they were like, oh, I just got a letter from you, let's talk about it. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, because the packets weren't out, so I had no idea what they were talking about. So I think we're
When the
just
public
decided that when the
notice
notice, when she sends it, she's just gonna copy me on it. Since it's got my name on it, at least I'll know what's going on.
And the problem is when she sends it out, we're sending them the information, we don't actually know for sure that they've submitted it yet.
Well, that's okay. At least I'll know that
That's a
the
possibility.
potential, and if somebody stops me again at Kim and Patty's and says, what the hell is going here, at least I'll have some idea.
Got it.
Cause that was the second time I got hit.
and I love paper.
Yeah, Kim and Patty's.
Well, if they-
Not there, but at a
Oh.
restaurant,
if
yeah, I
they
mean,
stop
somebody
you,
else
maybe
stopped me
they
somewhere
stop
else,
going
and
out
I was
to
like,
eat.
They wanna pay it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Like, yeah, you.
Yeah, your name's on it, I'm like, I'm really sorry, I don't know.
Next meeting.
Yeah, so when would we like to do the next meeting? For the one in the other conference room? Should we have Dorothy check the schedule for that room and email us a couple of dates? Or do we wanna decide now? Is the training room pretty easily available?
Did you take a picture of your board? Didn't we write it in for April? Did we write it in for April 11th possibility?
For the next meeting.
Do we have a
April
P&Z?
Is that
No,
our-
we
is
have a
that our
P&Z, we
regular-
have a P&Z meeting that day.
Well, that was our regular meeting, yeah, we wrote it in as
What's the week
possibility
before?
depending on the cases.
Fourth.
April 4th.
Is that too, well, we gotta get maps back
Maps.
from.
It's a month away.
so-
Yeah, that's yeah, a little less than a month.
Is that good
We
for
could
you?
do
Doug?
April 4th, yeah.
Wednesday, April 4? Everybody okay with that?
Mike, you wanna do it at
It's a
7?
It's a Wednesday, right?
Yeah, should we do it at 8, Mike?
I'll make it when I can, okay?
So,
Just drop
Around
by.
clock.
Yeah, just drop
we
by.
have to, are we gonna call that a working, do we have to post that like we did this?
Yeah, it just says, it's just gonna be in the classroom.
Special.
We're gonna do it at
special-
7 or 7:30?
7.
I like it.
7, it's good.
7?
I'll send Mike a reminder.
So we'll just do P&Z, we'll do a classroom, and
I
we'll
do
just.
have to make
Tough
sure the
crowd.
classroom.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. So if it's available, Dorothy, great, we'll move forward. If it's not, just if you would just send us an email and let us know.
We'll send you one either way, so you know for sure.
Just one?
And a paper copy.
And we'll send you the, boundary agreements,
Four.
Delivered.
All right, email boundary agreements.
and then the, meeting.
Blown up
confirmation.
picture of Johnsburg and Ringwood boundary.
Yeah, that'll probably take a
That'll,
little.
the maps will come a little bit after, because we'll have to get HR Green to do those. Anything else to add before we adjourn?
I was telling Doug, I noticed, the fellow that's going into some other nuts, the vacant property north of it, there was a surveyor out there
Yeah.
today, so
Right.
maybe there's some
Jingles
movement
or
on that.
something like that?
Yeah, that'll probably come in a month or
May.
so, yeah. April, I think April.
For April, for us?
Yep,
Yeah. Good.
What is it, Jingles?
Jackson's,
Jekyll's.
Jackson's.
Jackson's, okay.
Anything else?
Sir.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Meyer, do I have a second? Mr. Doherty? Anyone opposed? Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good meeting.
there another one of those Jekylls, or what's it called?
Jexels.
Yeah, is there a current location now?
No, he made that name
It's
up.
a new deal.
Yep.
Is it a local guy or somebody from?
Yes.
Okay.
So when's Ricky Rockets,
As soon as the ground,
Yeah,
Oh,
he's got a
okay.
new sign up.
I saw a
Um,
sign up a while
Yeah.
ago.
Meeting's adjourned, but if anybody was interested, I did happen to snag the